Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to review and summarize. I didn't mean to put this up there already, let me just put that away. Here to summarize the final of the LPL. If you missed it or you want to watch it, stay away because this is going to contain spoilers, because I am going to try to summarize the games the best way I could, or best way I can, the way you view it, because when you see it, it was could. When I'm doing it right now, it's can. We don't need to argue semantics. Let's jump right into it. So I was very excited for this series. I thought FPX would be better than JDG. Turned out it wasn't the case. JDG beat them pretty swiftly. And then FPX stomped down on IG. And JDG, I think in this series, I think they got away with murder. I think Top Esports definitely could have won this series at many points. I think... draft-wise, also JDG made some blunders. I think Yagao was very exposed on some specific champions. The thing that stands out the most is Yagao's Azir is one of the worst Azirs I've seen in the finals. Wink wink. For those who know, you know. Yagao struggled on Azir, itemized very poorly on Azir, and I think Knight, at least we got to see Syndra banned against him every single game, because this is something that Knight got every single game against IG, which was very surprising. And I think there was a world where IG also, if they, switched up the bans and changed the way they played somewhat, then maybe they could even beat Top Esports. But that's the nature of the LPL, right? It's, IG is very performance-based. Sometimes they play bad, sometimes they play worse. They are very coin-flippy in the way they approach the game. But I'm not here to talk about IG. Top Esports vs JDG was an interesting series. I think many times I felt like Top Esports was the better team. I think JDG kept composure better, and I think Kanavi also in many games got out-jungled, considering he was considered, the MVP of the split and so forth. He had moments where Karsa was the better jungler. But Karsa has always been very good the first 10-15 minutes of the game, but then later on he kind of stumbles and plays a lot worse. And I think this series was really evident of that. I think later when Kanavi finally got onto Trundle and he played against Karsa Gragas, this is where he dominated, but Top Esports draft was just too good, so it didn't matter. Let's jump in to the first game. So the first game is, you can take a look at this draft. Ornn first pick was unique. Trundle is out, Syndra was target banned, and Zoe as well into, of course, Knight. Knight is the key player of Top Esports. No matter how much you love Jackie Love, this is just the truth. Ornn was locked in as first. Alright, I think there's not much to comment. There's always a choice between Aphelios Ornn. Ornn is considered high prio. We don't see much Ornn mid lane anymore because people realize that giving up mid prio is not really a thing. It's just that mid prio in LCK and in Europe didn't really mean jack shit, but in LPL it actually matters, and Ornn mid lane was barely a thing over there. So Ornn top is locked in, and Set is the answer. Set is something we saw less and less of. I think teams began to figure out how to play into him, but this is a game where Set value is kind of decent, considering enemy team is going to lock in LeBlanc and he can itemize MR, so him on side is not going to be too bad. Aphelios, a staple pick, especially with Varos out, Kalista out, two of Loken's favorite champions, for those who didn't know. And also Kanavi is a ranged champion jungler connoisseur. He's known to be a kindred one-trick in the past, and Graves is a targeted ban towards him. So Ornn, Aphelios Set, nothing too drastic. Misfortune into Aphelios. This is the AD carry matchup we will see most games, because the other key AD carries are banned. That is Syndra, Varus, Kalista. Those are the ones that could potentially match there. And also, of course, Ezreal. But Ezreal is something that gives up prio, and this is something that you have to be wary about at this level. So LeBlanc is locked in. I like this a lot. When Syndra is out, the counters to LeBlanc are not really so clear. Even Lissandra, I don't think is a counter. I think this is a matchup that LeBlanc can win. It's a denial. It forces LeBlanc to play a specific way, but LeBlanc outscales Lissandra, and I think Lissandra is a very low tier champion. She has a shitty keystone, and it's just the itemization of her is quite weak. I just don't like Lissandra, honestly. I really don't like the champion. I think ever since she's received some buffs on live, which are kind of minor, I feel. They buffed Q, but they didn't really increase her power later on in the game. They buffed some AP numbers and so forth, and maybe now, you know, an AP heavy build can be better for Lissandra instead of the build that, you know, of course, what's his name, Knight went for, because he went for like this Proto Belt into Banshee, into Zonya. It's like a no damage build, into Oblivion Orb, Morello. Like, it was, I think most of the time, if you don't have Death Cap by 4 items, I think you're doing something wrong, and you're just gonna make yourself super weak unless you're playing like Syndra against a dive composition like Caps did against SK Telecom, where he went just tank Syndra. If he survives, he's going to win because he's playing against Vladimir. He just needs to survive the burst, so that was okay. But this was definitely not one of those scenarios. Lissandra damage is very necessary because, you know, Ornn is going to be able to itemize way too much armor otherwise. It's very necessary that you do damage on this Lissandra. Nevertheless, I think LeBlanc is better off than Lissandra, but Lissandra has, of course, the pleasure of having a strong 2v2, especially with the Lee Sin that you notice is getting locked in later. Second wave bans are kind of confusing because Thresh falls through. I think Thresh 4th pick is a very obvious one, especially when enemy bans Nautilus, Morgana, Leona, Braum. But maybe the thought process is that we are very happy to pick Yuumi into it. Yuumi Misfortune is something that people question a lot. I think in some cases it's good. It is a very mobile bot lane still, because that's usually the thought process, right? You want to have something very mobile with Yuumi, but Misfortune has high move speed, and that is something that Yuumi also enjoys. So with that being said, you know, unless the enemy team has a clear lockdown, I think Yuumi here is good with Misfortune, especially because it allows Misfortune to run Cleanse. Cleanse, of course, you can run usually with AD carries, but here you can compensate because you don't need to run Flash on your support, so you don't lose a summoner by running Cleanse. Decent value into Thresh, very good value into Lissandra, and that's another reason why I like Lissandra less. So Yuumi, Olaf into Lissandra specifically with Misfortune and these 3 first picks makes JDG's composition scale much better than the enemy team. This is the core idea of the game. JDG is going to scale better, top esports need to snowball the early game super hard, and they need to maintain that lead. That takes me to some in-game footage that I prepared here. Let's see if it's the right game. So here, it was a very interesting one because I reviewed this live, and most Olaf junglers, they do full clears. And here is, you know, a moment where Kanavi tries to break the pattern, and he tries to go for this gank onto 369. And he's rushing up here. Now, let me just mute that. You guys didn't hear it. He burns the flash. You know, looks nice at first hand, but this is an Olaf that is now behind on tempo in comparison to a Lee Sin. Lee Sin just needs to, in this matchup, needs to stay even, needs to try to farm as much as possible, and then he's going to be better at 6 most of the time. Here, Lee Sin gets to be ahead on tempo already. Now he's 2 camps ahead. He took 3 camps. He's going into top side, and also this gank puts the lane in a position where Zoom is slow pushing towards 369. So 369, all it needs to do here is to force freeze, and Karsa pathing from bottom side, he had leashless this game. Coming into top side, Zoom is screwed, because Olaf is very predictably going into bottom side. He can't stay on top side. So Olaf now showing and not clearing. Usually around this time, he would be done with his jungle already. He would be level 4. He would have a lot more jungle camps than this. He would have 24 CS and so forth. He would be ahead on tempo only. But like this, Zoom is screwed. So now Zoom position is terrible. Like Zoom is just done. Like here Zoom, his lane is really fucked. This is a poorly timed E. Maybe they could burn Flash if they didn't go for it, because this was an E that was used on W of Ornn while he was using W. So here still Zoom is kind of screwed, because how does he walk up? Lee Sin has time to chill here. He's taking the crab. Any type of pressure on river is going to be difficult, especially because Zoom warded in lane. His next ward is spawning in 10 minutes, so this is a very difficult situation. Yagao also a great LeBlanc, it's worth to point out. I was talking about his Azir, and LeBlanc is something that he has been very successful on, very patient, doesn't have any rush, and he understands that LeBlanc scales well. Here's a continuation though of Lee Sin Snowball. He takes the Gromp, Olaf is still clearing, and he's basing again, and Olaf has accomplished absolutely nothing. Zoom is already behind. Knight played this lane matchup very beautifully down in like in the mid lane. He is already a lot of CS ahead. He was corrupting potion ahead now. Surprising that he goes for the TP back here, because he could potentially walk back into lane. but he just wants to force LeBlanc TP2. That's one reason as to why you would do this, and he is continuously winning the lane because he had a better base, better items, continues the pressure. Very, very well done. So all in all, you know, from these moves, from Olaf ganking top and Knight playing so well in the mid lane, already they have a massive gold lead, and this was Top Esports' opportunity to look to snowball, because they have to snowball. JDG are going to scale better with this comp, and Olaf usually bridges that gap, but already now Karsa's so far ahead. Karsa's super far ahead. He's gonna take level 5, Kanavi's level 4. If you see a Lee Sin being ahead of an Olaf at this point in the game, then most of the time you need to be worried. Yagao is also playing for the late game, considering he's not running Cleanse. If you run TP, at least you have the option of splitting, and Cleanse is more for 2v2 forcing. I think TP is, of course, scales better than Cleanse in most cases, and this is a scenario where Yagao is going to go for Mercury. But that is the first dragon. A big issue this game, why Top Esports couldn't really snowball, was because they gave up dragons. They gave up dragons when it wasn't the time to do so. We had the mountain was given away. A lot of things happened that, they went wrong. Like here we had the TP play onto Zoom. This might look fine at first hand because 369, his base got cancelled. He was just trying to base. Zoom dies and Knight burns his TP for this. You know, cool, you get a kill, but 369 still needs to base. Or Lissandra loses all of her HP here on the TP play, and JDG get a dragon. When you have the composition Top Esports have, they need to focus on the Drakes and force a situation where they get the soul. Especially now when the odds of Ocean Soul being on the menu is super, super high, when you see that the second Drake is Mountain and Infernal has already been taken. So it's a 50-50 Cloud and Ocean, right? So here, giving up a Drake when you have the composition that wants to snowball, very, very bad decision. Next thing in line, this is good, you know, taking Rift, they're continuing. They are still relatively high on gold. It looks very, very nice. Here we have a situation where Karsa gets clapped. I think Karsa gets snapped in half, so another Drake goes in the direction. So here Karsa loses all of its HP. And this is what I meant earlier when Karsa is kind of looking lost. You know, early game looked beautiful, right? He controlled the game, secured the first Drake, kept ahead of the Olaf. Very, very nice. Olaf was completely nullified, and he managed to find Snowball in multiple lanes, right? And this time around, he gets chunked out. He is going into this bush. For what reason? He's trying to ward over the wall or something. It was very, very nonsensical. And this gives us another Drake for the composition that is 4,000 gold behind. Any opportunity JDG have to delay this game, the better it is. Another thing that was very well done by Yagao, and something that Top Esports missed, is that Lee Sin was showing on mid-wave a bit too much. We had this desperation play eventually, where Lissandra is trying to bait by walking in a way where, you know, he is not showing that they're doing Nash, but in reality it's just a shitty bait, and it didn't work. And this reeked of desperation. Top Esports get away, they lose 2 people. Nevertheless, anything that is close to even is very good for JDG, because once again they outscale. Still, we are 24 minutes in, and there are 2 Drakes that could easily be secured by Top Esports, and they could be on Ocean Soul already. 4 Dragons have been taken, and they were the stronger team to do so. So it's a massive blunder. Another thing that gave JDG a lot of breathing room was that Top Esports, while they had mid prio, side prio, they would win side with Lissandra 2v2 with Lee. Yagao was allowed to push out side lanes way too far because Lee Sin was showing on mid for no reason. Jackie Love and QQ didn't really push mid and rotate into a specific side. They didn't really control any rivers, and JDG had all the freedom in the world to farm freely. As they have a gold advantage that is 4,000, the more time that goes, the percentage that they are ahead is going to be smaller. I like to say that gold begets gold. So in a position that Top Esports was in, they needed to use Lee Sin on side to actually push the waves in, because if Yagao is allowed to push with the LeBlanc all the way in, it gives them a lot of breathing room. And that is breathing room that honestly they shouldn't have had, because the 2v2 was stronger on side on both sides. Maybe Ornn side is arguable that they aren't, because Lee said don't really do damage to this 300 armor Ornn, so maybe that's something you have to avoid. But definitely on Lissandra's side if she matches LeBlanc, and this is a position where Lee Sin needed to be in. And I think this was a big problem, because it gave JDG a lot of breathing room. As we let this game proceed, the gold advantage is not growing, and the way you need to do that is through side and through control of the enemy jungle, making sure that the enemy team loses as much creeps as possible by you controlling the waves. JDG were never forced to group on mid, and that is, you know, kind of a miracle, honestly, if you look at the game state that they were in. But as we continue, it gets better and better, and now, you know, there's even a cleanse on Misfortune, so she will never ever die again. And then we had the nail in the coffin, Ornn, you know, Lissandra, with her build, doesn't do crazy amounts of damage, and of course Zoom survives. He gets the knock, and you know, he does some good movement here, and then, yeah, the game is just over. The game is lost. So this was, yeah, the nail in the coffin, because now JDG are even in gold, and this is a scenario where I think Top Esports just lost the clear objective here. Beautiful early game, they were 3k gold ahead, they needed to convert, and they didn't. So that puts us into a game number 2. Game number 2 was a significant improvement from Top Esports. So let me just move that up a little bit. Great improvement from Top Esports. You could say that the drafts look similar from the previous game. The thing that confused me here was JDG have a beautiful first 3. Aphelios, Ornn, Azir. I think here you want to make sure that you have a very strong bottom matchup, that you can convert any type of pressure into top side. I think that's very, very key. I think Lee Sin also doesn't really belong here, because Lee, in most cases, you want to pick Lee together with the mid laner that can actually use him. So a LeBlanc or a Lissandra, I think those are the cases where Lee is very strong. With Azir, Lee, not so much. Not so much at all. And I think Trundle lock-in is given a lot of value right away with Ornn lock-in and Aphelios, but they were pretty committed to the Ornn series, honestly. I think Trundle gets super much value. Aphelios, Ornn, I mentioned it. Atrox gets picked, Misfortune, Standard into Aphelios is the dedicated matchup of the whole series, so I'm not going to talk about that too much. And then Azir gets locked in. Corki, Cyrus get banned, and Victor is the champion that gets locked in. So here you have a very good mid lane situation, right? Victor, of course, is one of Knight's favorite champions, but still Azir into Victor, if that's the matchup you're landing on when you're blind picking Azir, you're very happy. But Yagao turned out to be one of the worst Azirs that I've ever seen at this stages in playoffs. I've seen worse Azirs, but so far into a tournament, not really. And I think Azir is something by now that you kind of have to know how to play. So we're thinking about other options for Lee. I think something that came to my mind here was, for example, Kindred looked quite interesting. I think Kanavi Kindred is very nice here. I think just looking to pick a ranged champion into Trundle is something that is natural. Graves was, of course, banned. LeBlanc was banned as an adaptation from the previous game because Lissandra honestly was trash, and I think Knight also felt it, even though he picks it again later on. Lee Sin, I honestly would just love to see a Kindred here, but in a case where they ban Kindred, let's think deeper. Can't really pick tanks. It's hard for me to think without a champion list. Let me find a champion list very, very fast. LOL Wiki champions. Ranged junglers. Forgive me, my friends. Ranged junglers. It doesn't want to load the same way like last time. But yeah, let's just go with Kindred. Let's just go with Kindred. And then Tam, I would rather see a Morgana here over Tam. I think Morgana is the better champion here. I think Morgana Aphelios would be a nice lane phase. I am not too big of a fan of Tam Kench against Leona. Nevertheless, this was another game where early game was a complete disaster for the friends of JDG and also JDG. So let's take a look. I have prepared some game footage. If we look at the drafts, if you make a conclusion on the draft, I think it's very natural to say JDG are going to outscale. They have the Ornn, Azir, Aphelios, Lee Sin, Tam. Sure, but not really at the same time. Like Trundle gets so much value here, and Victor is also a scaling monster, and I think Victor is one of the champions that is good into Ornn. In comparison to last game, there is actually magic damage that Ornn has to deal with, and there's also a Trundle, so Ornn value is less. Azir is going to be very strong in this game because you know, he can deal with the distance of all teams, but the thing is he can't really run cleanse against Victor. It would hurt the matchup too much. So I think Top Esports definitely aren't in a position where they get hard outscaled. I think they scale really, really good too, and I think early game wise they will have better options. I think it's easier to set up a gank on all three lanes for their side. I think Trundle has so much freedom, in comparison to what the Lee can accomplish. Lee just has 3 tragic lanes to play around, and it's all about just counter ganking, and that's not a position that you really want to be in when you're Lee. Like, sure, it's playable, but at the same time, you know, when the enemy has 3 options and you need to defend 3 options and your aggressive option is not that good, that puts you in a jungle disadvantage, because it is Trundle that needs to pull trigger. He has 3 targets and you need to gamble and predict where he is. And that's a position that you don't want to be in. Of course, if you have prior and you can play around the blah, 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 then it's better. But a lot of things happened in this game, and Yagao was kind of running it down. Here we start. Let me just mute again. Yagao is, his mistake was the wave was bouncing and the wave was frozen, and Trundle has better tempo than Lee most of the time. He just jungles faster. I think this was also a game where Trundle got leash and Lee didn't. So that matters the most, more than the tempo of the junglers. And here Yagao is playing as if his jungler, he's playing like 3 junglers are behind him, let's be honest. And here he walks up and he dies. And Yagao flashed here. He also has no E because he skilled Q twice, and this is just ridiculous. You can't play the way you did without having E or, any kind of thought process at all. It was just a massive mistake. Still here, it isn't the end of days. It isn't the end of days because Victor doesn't get to base on core. He doesn't get the core base against double amp Tom against Doran's ring, so it's okay. But then we have the continuation, which is honestly, it's hilarious. It's fucking funny. I think Leona Misfortune is better to set up ganks in 2v2, but in 2v2 tournament, Tamkench and Aphelios is going to win 2v2 because they can poke and push, and Aphelios is quite OP early lane phase. But nevertheless, Yagao here commits all the way, and he commits all the way, and this is such a easy dream situation for Victor because he can easily maneuver himself around the situation, and this is them forcing an all-in onto Knight, and Kanavi goes for the flash Q, and this is just a disaster. Game is already quite boom from this position. Even top lane is slow pushing towards 369, and that one is quite rough. At least JDG bot lane get to poke a lot under the turret, so that's nice. But this is something that quickly gets broken too, because here, look at that play. They find the EQ onto Loken, and the EAT is quite slow. The EAT needs to happen right now, Limao. The EAT doesn't happen. The Ignite lands right before the heal. Beautifully played. They heal forward, and there's no Ignite because Limao is running Cleanse. So beautiful all in here from top esports. They find the summoner advantage and they go for it, and this kind of repairs their lane too. Very, very well done. And then Karsa is already here, is level 5 to level 4, and once again Karsa proving to be the more effective jungler. The 2v2 mid is just better for top esports. So this was quite interesting, and this continued. This lead went on to a point in time where top esports were just too strong. We had a lot of fights here and there, but I'm noticing that the video length is going to be crazy long if we don't go anywhere. Here Azir build honestly made me really sad. So Azir has an Ornn on his team, and he went for a Nashor's Tooth into Morello, and the Morello is for Misfortune healing, Trundle healing, Aatrox healing. It's understandable, but I think most of the time buying Executioners is so much more convenient on other champions, and the MR numbers are already pretty high, so I think you'll be in a position where Void Staff will give you too much value. And then the key thing is, he is going into Zhonya's Hourglass next, which is honestly a joke. In a lot of cases, you need to itemize in a way where, very rarely you want to have Hourglass on Azir. Very rarely. Unless you're playing against Z mid or something like that, and you get like 100% value all the time because the enemy team is diving you and you have to have it. Or the enemy is super AD heavy or something. But in this case, you're just delaying your own spike, and buying Zhonya's to have an item that gets upgraded is honestly very sad in a lot of ways. Zoom dies here, we had a nice fight, blah blah blah. I wanted to just continue to the point where Azir build is just honestly mind-boggling. So I had this fight, Kanavi no flash. They find Kanavi, they commit on him, and then they finish, of course, the thing. Here Loken fights Knight, was very well played. I think maybe he needed to squeeze in one more auto. Jackaloff could have flashed earlier, but yeah. that the Victor is just too strong. And Azir, looking at his items, Azir put himself in a position where he's never going to be useful in this game. He's never going to be useful. These 3 items is one of the the weakest 3-item power spike I've seen since BDD Azir against T1. These are just shit items. It doesn't. You're not powerful. You need Void Staff. You need Death Cap. You're not powerful at all. You have a Zonya that's upgraded for additional armor. It's just a shit build. It's honestly a shit build. What should be a build? He needs to tell his AD carry to get Executioners. He needs to go for Liandry, into maybe Void Staff, into Death Cap 4th, something like that, because there was too much MR already on enemy team and he needed to DPS the tanks down. And he wasn't doing so. And I needed to ask his AD carry to get Executioners or something like that. But Yagao Azir was awfully disgusting. And that's the ending. But everything stemmed from that early game play where Victor was just 2-0 ahead and the game was just in control for Top Esports most of the time. Of course, there are more details to it, but let's move on to the next game before this video turns into 1 hour. Okay. Game number 3 was probably the most boring game because I think it was a massive outdrafting. I think Renekton really didn't belong here. I thought, JDG banned Aatrox, first pick Trundle, Aphelios Braum, they locked in Misfortune Yuumi right away, didn't want to get Yuumi banned second wave, and then Jace gets locked in. Ornn LeBlanc is banned for Top Esports, and here, if you see Aphelios already, just lock in Malphite. Just lock in Malphite, lock in a tank, and just play into bottom. You have Misfortune Yuumi into Aphelios Braum, you have something to play for Trundle, you can set up ganks onto Aphelios, no problem. Just isolate Jace, no problem. Even if you wouldn't want to isolate Jace, that's okay too, because you have Trundle, Malphite, easy kill on Jace. Almost any point in the game, doesn't matter how far behind Malphite is. Instead they lock in Renekton. What on earth do you want to do with Renekton against Gragas, Jace, Braum, Aphelios? You have to have some crazy flanks, you have to have some, jungler that really synergizes well with you, like a Sejuani is really rough for Jace, or like an Elise. But this is a Jace is going to run phase rush and he's going to be fine against Trundle the whole game, especially because the damage mix of Renekton Trundle, the synergy is just not there. And I think if they had Trundle Malphite, for example, that would have been very dirty. Azir gets locked in again, and you guys know what I think about Yagao's Azir. This is another Hourglass Azir, and it didn't work out well. They managed to find a lead, they managed to find a lead indeed, but then they went for this tragic dive, which put the game in the coffin very, very fast. So here, they went for the play where they were hovered into the top because they play for Rift, but in reality here, Renekton took control of the full topside space. If Azir hovers on the bot and they don't know Trundle position, they could have controlled the whole map. But instead, if they go for this play where Azir is hovering into top and they see his movement into there, they need to simply just give up bottom. Corki package comes in, Gragas ult was really disgusting, but Kasa with the nice stopwatch compensates, and then the TP here, and if Top Esports composition, as you can see, if they are even or ahead, then the game is just lost. Renekton is too useless, Trundle is too useless. The Corki was also even of Azir at this point, and when you go for the mana mute, expect Azir to have some kind of advantage. Also lethal tempo, Knight went for everything that scales, and he's just too strong. And then the whole rest of the composition as well, Braum, 3 range champions, and Gragas is just very, very tough to lose this game because the enemy composition is just too weak. They have no real threat at all, because this Renekton is also a Renekton that went for Black Cleaver first, and Tiamat, no Black Cleaver, no Blade Runner King. That's the whole purpose of the champion, and even in this game I think Blade Runner King wouldn't save him because the matchup, I don't know, it's just tragic draft from JDG. That's why, I mentioned before that Top Esports could have won this. They could have won this for sure. They could have won this series for sure. We have game number 4. Game number 4. Trying to remember what happened game number 4. I'm talking so much that it's kind of slipping my mind. This is... Sorry. Let me just center that. Boom. Game number 4. Trying to remember what happened in game number 4. Let me see what clips I prepared for game number 4. Oh yes, this was another game where Top Esports was actually through. Nevertheless, this game, I think it was JDG showing a lot of great patience, but at the same time, they put themselves in a position where they could potentially lose the game. If we look at the draft, Aphelios, this time around, Thresh gets locked in early. This was something that got banned second wave. Thresh is very key for Aphelios. This we like. LeBlanc we also like. First three we like for both teams. Honestly, it's hard to complain. Aphelios, Misfortune, Ornn gets taken away. This time it is for 369. This is not Zoom playing it. So that was a change. And then coming into second wave, Zoom picked Gangplank. This is a beautiful Gangplank. Beautiful Gangplank. The value of this Gangplank is magnifique. Because you have that silly Lissandra mid lane. So that gives, of course, the champion more value, the GP, because you can just cancel her combo. You just win. The GP gets too much citrus fruit, vitamin C value against Lissandra. So that's very, very nice. Also against Misfortune, very good. The ultimate cancels her strut passive, and at the same time, she is immobile when the moment it happens. Boom. Very, very nice. Everything about GP here is beautiful. Sylas as well. A lot of strong ultimates. It's hard to go wrong with any ultimate here. Key difference with LPL and, of course, LCK, when Sylas was played by Kana, he stole Ornn ult and he had that on cooldown every fight because that's how infrequently they fought in the LCK finals. This time around, he always had a juicy ultimate. Lissandra, Nautilus, Ornn, very, very high tier ultimates. And this is why they locked in Sylas Jungle Blind. Sylas Jungle Blind is, of course, risky because in a lot of cases, your early game is going to be quite weak. And this was a game where Top Esports was ahead and they were lining themselves up for that last dragon. This time around, Top Esports actually managed to find some kills with the Lissandra mid onto Yagao with the LeBlanc, but they didn't snowball hard enough, and then they reached a point in time where they kind of threw the game away. Because I don't think necessarily that they get hard outscaled because they have a lot of tools to get onto Aphelios, but the moment Aphelios has QSS, I think they cannot win the game anymore. So yeah, I guess they get kind of outscaled. Like QSS is too big of a counter, and if you can get away from this death ball that Top Esports has, then definitely JDG outscale. But I think that is going to happen rather late in the game, so Top Esports definitely have opportunities, especially with how the game went down. Because if you are stronger early, in a lot of cases you can set yourself up to be, aligned for 4 dragons. And this is what happened within the game. So I prepared the moment here. I thought it was a good teaching moment. A lot of people ask me, when is it better to take a Drake or trade? In this particular scenario, I had a discussion on stream. People asked if, it's worth it. Like, this is a moment where the next Drake, 4th Drake is the one that always matters. Of course, sometimes teams screw up and things happen. Here, Zoom gets a full turret. Ornn already TP'd, Zoom gets to keep TP. They also pushed mid, so Misfortune is losing CS here. She's walking up and getting them. Lissandra's burning TP too, so a lot of TPs, 2 TPs get burned. And on top of that, Zoom gets to push in all the way and a turret. So that's a fine trade for a Mountain, right? Fine trade. Like, sure, in this case, maybe Mountain gives value because there's Ornn and so forth, and there's arguments to be made, but I think this was a good decision because I think on paper, JDG would not win a fight. I think the later and later the game goes, the better it is for them, and I think their odds are better on the 4th dragon. And no matter how many Drakes you have, the 4th Drake is always going to be the one that is the most valuable. I understand the Drake scale, don't get me wrong, Mountain Drake gives you stats, Infernal gives you stats, Cloud gives you ult cooldown, I get it. But the 4th Drake is what is game changing at that level. Things, meaning like if you get Soul, it just shifts the game completely, so you understand my point. The thing that happened in this game was there was a very good setup from Top Esports, lining themselves for the Mountain Drake, as we spoke about. They are in position. JDG haven't scaled enough, and it's still even goal, but these 3 Drakes and the point in time in the game is very important for Top Esports. Let's say they get this Mountain, and then they set up for Baron. Even though JDG outscale, it is a composition that doesn't scale fast enough because they are reliant on QSS and all of these items, and Top Esports still have an Ornn that is going to build items, and Top Esports 22 minutes into the game can be considered late game already. You know, when Mountain Drake and, the Soul is on the table and Baron is on the table, this can be considered late game already. That's why I hesitate to say that JDG outscale. Because, like, you can't go for a composition that just, you hope you reach a point where you have 6 items. It just rarely happens. Usually late game already and competitive is 2 items, 3 items maximum if you're fed, right? That's already late game when Elder is going to be on the table and Baron is on the table. Top Esports definitely can do Baron at this point in time. Lee can tank it forever. Ornn can also tank it, and they have enough damage to set up for a turn. It's that to me is late game. Looking at this play, Limao managed to die. We take a look at first. A lot of engaged tools for Top Esports. JDG are of course looking to fight this because obviously they just need to. They have the advantage of Aphelios being 2 items. Limao gets caught here, tries to stopwatch. Kanavi needs to ult himself with Alessandra. The Trash is dead and they manage to get away. They try to flash for flash. Loken survives and Knight burns his ult and Loken manages to lifesteal here on the Raptors that are about to spawn. So that's lucky for Loken that they managed to spawn. But here Top Esports was lining up for the mountain, and this is where things got kind of wrong. So they're looking, JDG are trying to contest, but the setup was very good for Top Esports. The key thing here is that they need to just continue to do Drake because JDG have no way of entering. There's no way in hell they actually enter the Drake space. It's too difficult. It's way too difficult. Karsa can also look to kick out the Silas. He has magic resistance at this point in time, a Hex Drinker, so he's not going to get one-shot by LeBlanc. They needed to just stay in the pit, but instead they hard commit. He looks for the kick. They trade 1 for 1, so the Karsa jungle is dead. Here, Thresh is starting to respawn as well, and now they need to consider that they have no smite. Maybe 369 had this unsealed spellbook ready. I'm not too certain, but it's a question to raise. But the fact that they threw away the situation where they could easily align themselves for a dragon is a problem. It's really, really a problem. So here they finally get it. Lissandra dies. Very, very problematic. And then they are looking to force, of course, because I don't know why they were looking to force. Honestly, they are playing as if the enemy team is going to get Ocean Soul. This is the first Mountain Drake. They could have just given up and played for something else. Limao gets a wonderful hook here onto Jackie Love. Lissandra's dead, and Top Esports just threw away the game. And then this is going to line up towards the Nashor as well, and JDG get to reach the point in time with their comp where they are monster strong. So Karsa gets killed here, very difficult situation to steal. Nautilus has no wards, as you can see in his inventory. This was a game-winning state for Top Esports into losing state very, very fast. Now with Nash, they can get the gold. Gangplank is very strong now, and Aphelios has 3 items. When he gets QSS, it's going to get even worse, and it was just a disaster across the board. Jackie Love and dying with Misfortune on side. We saw this, we've seen this many times. He survives with very little HP here, but still, at least Karsa backs him up this time. Oh, very close, very close. Okay. And that was game number 4. Game number 5 was a very interesting game too. Very, very interesting game as well. We look at the draft first. It was very, very smart from Top Esports what they did. Picking Brom here, understandable. Misfortune Ornn, that whole ordeal. I'm a bigger fan of Thresh. I think Thresh is a better lane. You don't sacrifice your lane, and you have ways of dealing with all those spells. Brom, when he gets overloaded with things that he needs to accomplish, he just, Oh, sorry, you guys don't see the draft. What I meant is, even though Brom is good against Ornn and Misfortune, he can only be good against one at the same time, unless the enemy team sucks. So let's say Ornn ults, right? If Brom wants to deny his ult completely, he needs to turn his shield backwards, right? So you don't get tagged by the Brittle, because the Brittle can be procced by, for example, Kassadin in this game, because it's slow and it just does the Brittle damage, and that's also juicy. So you need to turn your shield in the other direction. So Misfortune could just wait. She could just wait with her ultimate, right? So she sees the Brom shield. Brom shield cannot counter 2 champions at the same time, right? So one can just ult and then force it, and so forth, right? So it's not like Braum value flies through the roof because he has two options. Sure, it's a bit better because he has two options, but still he can't counter both at the same time, theoretically. So I still like the Thresh more because I think Thresh gives you more options in lane, and I think when you pick Braum, you line the enemy up for the Bard. Nevertheless, Aphelios, Braum, Aatrox, Aatrox into Ornn. Tobii Sports had success with this. One game, they went for it another game. Aatrox is a tricky champion to pinpoint because some games he looks like absolute trash, some games he looks better. I think it completely depends on the player and the enemy team and how much CC there is and how much attention Aatrox has and what the point in time he fights. You know, forcing the enemy to buy Grievous Wounds and Morello can be hurtful in some compositions, especially when you need those key items and your other champions can compensate for the lack of item for the enemy team, or like a Skarner forces people to buy QSS. This matters, right, in terms of spikes, because sometimes all you need is one champion to be better than the enemy 5 champions to outscale the enemy team, right, or to outfight the enemy team. If you have one champion that does very well into 5 champs, you can figure out ways to make that champion excel. It's not necessarily like team comp versus team comp, because sometimes one champion can make a team comp. I hope that makes sense. Nevertheless, Aatrox, Rek'Sai gets locked in. This is something that was avoided. Rek'Sai is very powerful in the LPL. We have many crazy good Rek'Sai players. Rek'Sai in the LPL is a completely different champ than what we see in the West. Western Rek'Sai is not good. Trundle is out, Graze is out, Rek'Sai gets locked in, Sejuani gets picked as a lock-in into Rek'Sai. That's completely fine. That's okay. Rek'Sai is going to have jungle prio. Not many champions are going to win jungle prio early against Rek'Sai. You have the option of maybe going Olaf. You know, you can maybe pick Olaf here. But all good. They lock in Sejuani. They have Braum, Aatrox, Aphelios already. It's all right. You know, I don't mind this. Bard is very good into Aphelios. Aphelios is immobile. We know that already, and nothing can save him from the Bard unless you're playing Thresh. Thresh is the perfect savior for you, right? That's why, you know, picking Braum just puts you in a position where the enemy can pick almost anything. Like, you can go Zac support and be in a similar spot, right? Bard is a winner because you can just aim on Aphelios. He's very, very slow, very immobile. Braum can save you from Ornn maybe, Misfortune maybe, but it becomes very, very bad. And that's why you always have to lock in Thresh, regardless of how juicy the Braum looks like, because the enemy has Ornn and Misfortune. Sejuani, Sylas. This was a very clever adaptation in the game from Top Esports, where they sent Sylas top into Ornn and then Aatrox mid into Kassadin. The key thing, though, is that 369 was playing the Aatrox and Knight was playing top lane. Even though it's genius on paper, it is very different to play these two lanes. It is very, very different. Karsa's not going to back you up the same way that he does in mid lane, Mr. Knight. It's something that you need to practice. It takes a lot of finesse. It was genius on paper because they were in a position where the enemy had MR on Kassadin, armor on Ornn. It was beautiful, wonderful. It was a great position in the game if you look at the idea on paper. But the play, it looked very, very bad. So the Kassadin pick, I really don't like. Kassadin pick is just a big liability here. What would you pick here? Honestly, I think you just lock in fucking Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia is by far the best champ here. You will have good matchup into Sylas, good matchup into Aatrox. You can run Cleanse, and you can dominate the whole game. Cassiopeia is by far the best pick here. Kassadin was just a big heap of risk. And the only reason this game looked close was because they had Kassadin. Looking at the game, there was some hilarious occurrences, guys. Hilarious occurrences. Let me bring it up. Okay. So first and foremost, I mentioned, genius, absolutely genius from Top Esports to do this move. But with the way Knight is managing the wave, he's playing like his 1v1 tournament. Like, usually you don't see top laners having this wave position, especially in this matchup. Sylas needs to give up the lane most of the time against Ornn, and Sejuani jungle path. Let me just see what she actually did, because it looks kind of weird. Let me just double check. Sejuani jungle pathing. Sejuani top red into red into bottom side. Okay. So they invaded. he felt safe. So Rek'Sai doesn't have a lot of options. So that's the key thing. Rek'Sai doesn't have a lot of options. He can only look for gank. And I think most top laners that have experience are not going to fall for this gank, right? The way he managed the wave was very reckless. He was trading very heavily, and then Zoom could look for the freeze. The freeze happened on the cannon wave, and Rek'Sai died to the gank. Hiragao manages to find the Q on the Aatrox TP as well. And then Knight, of course, dies here with the wave being in a terrible position. Terrible position. And Knight, also on top of that, Knight actually burns Flash. So I think the wave management was poor. I think I need to just look back once again to make sure that what I'm saying is true. Because here, did Ornn actually freeze the wave? Ornn did not freeze the wave. So if Ornn froze the wave, okay, it would be a different scenario, and maybe, you know, it would be difficult for Knight to actually play the lane, and maybe Sejuani needed to look for level 2 gank top to break the lane or something like that, or just give up bottom red to you know keep playing on top side, and that would be fine, right? That would be a decision that you would have to make as Carson. But in this position, Ornn is actually not freezing the wave, so Sylas can play more cautiously and play on Sejuani timer and let him play. But Knight is trading very aggressively, skew level 1, and just pushing like a maniac because he sees that Ornn has armor and he wants to trade and fight. Okay, so we have the gank. There was no freeze from Ornn. This is very problematic. Knight dying. They survive the bottom gank. Bard E is out with the flash and the E, and then they go through the wall. Zoom, zoom, zoom. It was very well played. I think maybe they could have followed here because Limao had no spells, no summoners. And but it's kind of crazy, you know, you don't know where the portal is landing, so you're kind of worried about going there. Kanavi is also back in the game because his top laner set up a kill for him. And then we have another one of Knight's mishaps. So we had already Aatrox TP burnt for nothing, which means that Kassadin can TP back to lane. Aatrox has no item, and this is something that is very helpful for Kassadin that has MR runes and, you know, needs any type of help to survive this lane, because Aatrox is going to win against Kassadin naturally. I think Kassadin needs to max E in this matchup because Q is used a lot by Aatrox, so you stack it very fast. Here Knight goes for an all-in that I think, yeah, doesn't really work out. He gets minion blocked and he goes into the turret. It's a decent all-in because he's winning, but this is a disaster. You know, it's a disaster on many accounts. It's terrible. So already an early game that should have looked rough for top esports looks a lot easier because JDG managed to steal it away. Kassadin survives, Ornn is ahead, and Knight is in big trouble. And there we go. Knight has died 3 times in the last game of the LPL Finals in 7 minutes. Something is off. So sometimes, as a coach, I can tell you that you need to sometimes take the decision between what is genius and what is, you know, what is something that your players are prepared for, because this didn't look like something that the players were prepared for. There was too much genius happening at once, you know? We got the invade, we got the enemy red buff, we are ahead, Sejuani's head of Rek'Sai, Jesus Christ, everything's good, Sylas into Ornn, he has no MR, he has armor, beautiful, Aatrox into Kassadin, we got them by the balls. And here they needed to just tone it down a little bit, and Sylas needed to play better, because, yeah, in the end it was in fact genius, because they were set up to win the game from that alone. We fast forward, you know, we mentioned how good Bard is against enemy team, Kassadin surviving the early game, Ornn scaling away in this game now. Ornn being so far ahead means he's going to win side. JDG are definitely poised in this game to win it based off of that early game. We had a lot of fighting back and forth, not like top esports just gave up and died. There was this beautiful fight that we can leave on as the ending, the beautiful ending for the game. We have a lot of skirmishes, honestly, a lot of beautiful fight. Look at that. Ooh, ooh. Very nice Bard ultimate. Limao just brought the juice. He just brought the juice, man. Look at that, man. Absolutely monstrous. And then we have another one right here. Beautiful patient. Maybe he could have ulted earlier, right? Maybe he could have ulted earlier. This was a scenario where Braum is in kind of a tricky position because he doesn't know really what he needs to do, because he like Ornn applies brittle to almost the whole team. This is Silas's Ornnold, so don't pay attention. Ornnold comes in here, brittle gets applied, and then Kassadin procs the brittle here. That's the big burst here that happens. Braum manages to block it, but the Bardal was too beautiful. Aphelios was in trouble, and Bard is indeed a very big counter to Aphelios. So that's it for the series. That's it for the series. To summarize, I think Top Esports definitely could have won. Top Esports definitely could have won. Many opportunities, they were ahead. 2 games specifically. Game number 5 as well. I think they outsmarted JDG there in the beginning, but they managed to throw that away because Knight was running it down because he was playing top lane for the first time in probably a very long time. And with that being said, I am less hyped on JDG after this best of 5 because I think Top Esports showed a lot of promise in terms of how well they played early. I think Karsa looked like the better jungler in a lot of cases. Kanavi had that game 4 where game 3 where he completely destroyed Karsa, which was quite nice too. But all in all, a fun series to watch. I think, I'm very, very sad we don't get to see an MSI. Sorry for the summary being 50 minutes, but it was 5 games. The other best of 5s was 3-0, so we had a lot more to digest. And sorry for slowing down there in the middle. I'm doing all of these in one take, so sometimes I forget. Thank you so much for watching. I wish you all the best. And if you reached the end of the video, bless you and bless your face. Only if you reach the end of the video.